Disclaimer: this content is intended for a mature audience only. Viewer discretion is advised. The room was quiet, yet heavy, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes every breath feel fragile. I lay on the pillow, my face damp, the fabric beneath me carrying the weight of tears that refused to hide. The night stretched long, and in that emptiness, I felt both exposed and invisible at once. My heart beat unevenly, aching with words I couldn't say, with fears I couldn't untangle. It was then I felt the shift, the mattress dipping softly, the warmth of his presence settling near. My husband didn't speak at first. He simply lay beside me, close enough that the air between us trembled with an unspoken truth. My eyes, swollen from crying, stayed closed, as if avoiding his gaze might protect me from the storm inside me. But then, gently, he reached out. His hand cupped my face with a tenderness that broke me even more than my tears had. There was no anger in his touch. No impatience. Only a quiet steadiness that held me when I felt most uncertain. I could feel the tremor of his breath as he leaned closer, his forehead brushing mine, his silence saying everything my heart needed to hear but didn't know how to believe. The closeness carried warmth, a fragile safety, and yet beneath it lingered a tension, soft, magnetic, dangerous in its pull. I wanted to resist the comfort, to keep clinging to my sadness, but his presence left no room for walls. His nearness made my tears falter, made my lips part as though they might whisper something, anything, just to anchor myself to the moment. Vulnerability tangled with longing, sorrow collided with tenderness, and for one breathless second, it felt like we stood on the edge of something unknown. And then, just as the world seemed to steady, just as I thought I understood what this night would be, his closeness deepened, shifting the silence into something else entirely, something that made my heart race, something that held both promise and danger in the same breath. I froze, caught between the pain I had carried and the solace I was being offered, unsure whether to surrender to it or push it away. That was the moment everything began to change. His hand lingered against my cheek, steady as if he were holding something far more fragile than my skin. For a moment, I didn't breathe. The silence between us was no longer empty, it was filled with everything we had not said for weeks, maybe months. The apologies that lived on his tongue, the doubts that lived in my chest, the ache of distance that had quietly grown in the spaces of our marriage. I remembered how he used to make me laugh so easily, how his voice could soften even the hardest parts of my day. But somewhere along the way, the weight of life had shifted. Bills, responsibilities, unspoken expectations, they built invisible walls between us, and I found myself crying alone more often than being held. Tonight was just another night I thought I'd drown in my own silence. Yet here he was, undoing those walls one quiet touch at a time. He brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, and I dared to open my eyes. His gaze was searching, steady, as if he were trying to read every secret I had hidden beneath those tears. I saw regret flicker there, but also devotion, something raw that felt almost too vulnerable for him to show. And suddenly, I realized he wasn't just trying to comfort me, he was fighting for me, in the only way he knew how. I wanted to speak, to ask him why he had let me feel so unseen, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I lay there, trapped between resentment and longing, my heart pulling me closer even as my pride begged me to pull away. His thumb traced slow circles against my skin, grounding me, and for the first time in so long, I felt seen, not just as his wife, but as a woman who was breaking, who still longed to be loved fully. He leaned closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his breath against my lips, not yet a kiss, but a promise hovering in the space between us. My chest tightened, every second stretching like eternity, the suspense of what might come next making my whole body tremble. And in that breathless moment, I knew this night would not leave us the same. His nearness made the room feel smaller, as though the walls themselves were leaning closer, holding us in a fragile cage of memory and possibility. I could hear the faint hum of the city beyond the window, the muted world outside carrying on while ours felt paused, suspended in the space of a single breath. My tears had slowed, but inside me, the storm was far from quiet. I thought of the countless nights I had turned away from him, whispering excuses about being tired, about needing space, when in truth I was starving for the very thing I was denying: his closeness, his touch, his voice soft against my ear reminding me I wasn't alone. Pride had been my shield, silence my defense, but they had only deepened the distance between us. Now, with his hand steady against my cheek, I wondered how much of that distance was of my own making. He looked at me as if he knew what I was thinking. His eyes held a question he didn't dare speak: "Do you still love me the way I love you?" And though my lips didn't form the words, my heart answered in the frantic rhythm of its beating. But then came another shadow, one that lived not in the room but in our history. I remembered the night I found him working late, staring blankly at his phone long after midnight, his face lit by a glow that wasn't mine. He had sworn it was nothing, only messages from work, yet the doubt lingered. It haunted me, made every touch feel both wanted and dangerous. That memory pressed against me now, as real as the warmth of his body beside mine. He shifted closer, his forehead brushing mine, his breath uneven. I could feel the weight he carried too, the guilt of mistakes, the burden of not knowing how to fix what had cracked between us. We were two people caught in the gravity of our own secrets, colliding again, unsure if it would heal us or shatter us further. The silence grew heavy, not empty but charged, every heartbeat a drumbeat of suspense. I wanted to surrender to him, to let the night carry us back to what we had lost. Yet another part of me, fragile and wary, held back, afraid that giving in might mean forgetting the pain I had carried. And so I stayed in that suspended moment, trembling, uncertain which would come first, an unraveling or a redemption. His hand did not move from my face, and yet it felt as though the entire world was shifting beneath that touch. My chest rose and fell too quickly, as if my body was betraying the calm I was desperately trying to hold. His thumb brushed over the dampness of my cheek, and I hated how much I needed that tenderness, how much I had craved it in silence. He leaned closer, his voice barely more than a whisper: "I can't stand seeing you like this." The words cut through me, both comforting and cruel. For months, I had wanted him to notice, to reach past my distance and find me. And now that he was here, so close I could feel his heart in the air between us, I didn't know if I could let myself believe it was real. I wanted to tell him everything, that the nights I cried were not only about him but about me, about the woman I felt I had lost in the midst of being a wife. That somewhere in our shared life, my laughter had dimmed and my fire had quieted. I wanted to scream that I didn't just need his love, I needed to feel alive again, with him, because of him. But the words tangled in my throat, stuck between pride and fear. His forehead rested against mine, and for the first time in so long, we were breathing in rhythm. That fragile alignment made me ache, because it reminded me of when we were unstoppable, when we could talk about dreams until dawn, when even silence between us felt like music. Now the silence burned with tension, heavy and dangerous, like a match waiting to be struck. I felt his other hand slip around my waist, not forceful, not demanding, just present, steady, protective. The warmth of his body seeped into mine, and every barrier I had built began to tremble. The closeness was intoxicating, a reminder of everything we had been and everything we still could be. And yet, beneath that sweetness, an unease clawed at me. What if this was temporary? What if, come morning, we fell back into the same distance, the same ache? I was torn between surrender and resistance, between the comfort of his arms and the weight of my doubts. My tears had stilled, but my eyes burned as I looked into his. They were so close, so unguarded, I almost couldn't bear it. And in that suspended heartbeat, just as I thought I might finally give in, he whispered my name, soft, raw, pleading, and the sound of it sent a shiver through me that felt like both a promise and a warning. His whisper lingered in the air, trembling between us, but before I could respond, something shifted inside me, something sharp and unyielding. A memory surfaced, uninvited, the last time he had said my name in that same soft way. It had been followed by a silence that lasted for days. He had withdrawn then, without explanation, leaving me to question whether I had imagined his tenderness. The echo of that abandonment burned through my chest now, even as his arms held me. I pulled back just slightly, enough for his hand to falter against my cheek. His brow furrowed, confusion flickering across his face, and for the first time tonight, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not guilt, fear. Fear of losing me. That truth alone nearly undid me. Why now? My voice broke, barely audible, but the words escaped before I could stop them. Why touch me like this now, after so long? The question hung between us, heavier than the silence. His jaw tightened as if he were holding back 1,000 answers, none of them simple. Because, he finally whispered, his voice low and rough, I was afraid you wouldn't let me. Something inside me cracked open. I realized that the walls I had built to protect myself had also trapped him outside. I wasn't the only one who had been lonely in this marriage. I wasn't the only one aching for a closeness that felt lost. The realization stung and soothed all at once. Still, the doubts didn't vanish. My heart recoiled with another sharp twist of memory, the late-night glow of his phone, the unanswered questions, the nights I convinced myself I was no longer enough. That uncertainty pressed against the tenderness of this moment like a thorn in soft skin. I searched his face, desperate for truth, terrified of what I might find. His eyes didn't waver, though, they stayed on me, unblinking, raw. And in that gaze, I saw both a plea and a confession, though he hadn't yet spoken it aloud. The air between us grew charged, my body trembling not from fear, but from the weight of choosing whether to let him back in fully, or keep him forever at a distance. And just when I thought the night couldn't grow heavier, he whispered, "There's something I never told you." The words fell like a stone into still water, rippling through the fragile closeness we had rebuilt, leaving me breathless, waiting, afraid of the truth about to surface. His words cut through the fragile air between us. "There's something I never told you." My chest tightened, bracing for a confession that could undo everything, that could shatter what little ground we had regained. His eyes stayed locked on mine, though, trembling with a fear I had never seen in him before. "I was lost," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "Not because I stopped loving you, but because I didn't know how to reach you anymore. Every time you turned away, every time I saw your tears and didn't know how to wipe them away, I felt useless. I buried myself in work because I thought it was the only way I could still take care of us. But all I was doing was leaving you lonelier." The confession unraveled something inside me. It wasn't betrayal he had hidden, but his own shame, his own quiet breaking. I realized then how easily love could fracture, not with a loud shatter, but with silence, with two hearts waiting for the other to bridge the gap. Tears welled again, though softer this time, not from pain alone but from the weight of truth. My voice trembled as I finally spoke the words I had swallowed for so long. "I thought I wasn't enough for you anymore. That I had become invisible." His hand tightened against my cheek, desperate, steady. "You were never invisible. You've been the only thing I could see, even when I was too blind to show it." The tension that had coiled between us snapped then, not with violence, but with release. The walls we had built around ourselves began to crumble, leaving only the raw, imperfect truth of two people who had almost lost each other. I leaned into his touch, allowing myself to feel it fully, without doubt. The closeness was no longer just comfort, it was a vow, silent but unshakable, that we would no longer hide from one another. For the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed deeply, without the weight of unspoken words pressing against my chest. And just when I thought the night had given all its revelations, he whispered again, softer now, almost breaking, "I was afraid you'd stop loving me." The twist of it struck deep, because I had carried the exact same fear. And in that mirrored ache, in that shared vulnerability, I finally understood, we hadn't been broken by a lack of love, but by our silence. And now, together, we were learning how to speak again. The night softened around us, as though the world itself had taken a deep breath and stilled. His forehead rested against mine, and for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt no distance between us. The weight of silence was no longer heavy, it was tender, like a pause between heartbeats. We lay there without rushing, letting truth settle into our bones. The tears had dried, leaving only the quiet warmth of his hands still holding my face. I realized then that healing did not arrive like lightning, it came slowly, like dawn creeping through the curtains, patient and steady. In that silence, the subplots of our lives began to unravel gently. The doubts I had carried, the glow of his phone, the cold nights spent apart, no longer held their sharp edge. They became part of the story, scars on a shared history, reminders not of what we had lost but of what we had endured together. And in his eyes, I saw the same recognition, that love wasn't something untouched by cracks, but something that grew stronger through them. He whispered again, softer now, "We'll do better. I'll do better." It wasn't a grand promise, but it was honest, and that honesty mattered more than perfection. I touched his face in return, tracing the lines of tiredness and devotion, and felt a quiet certainty bloom inside me. We had both been afraid of losing, of failing, of admitting weakness. But tonight, in our vulnerability, we found the kind of closeness we had been searching for all along. As the night stretched on, I let myself rest against him, my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. It felt like the sound of home, fragile yet unbreakable. And in that stillness, I understood something simple but profound. Love isn't measured by how often it shines, but by how fiercely it chooses to stay when darkness lingers. The story of us was not one of perfection, but of persistence. And as I drifted into sleep with his arms around me, I knew one truth would remain: we had found our way back, not by escaping the silence, but by learning to speak through it.